All right, the Canon RF 35mm f1.8. I've got two pieces of good news for you and one piece of bad news, but we'll get to the bad news later. Let's start with the good news. And the good news is that most recently, within like the last, I think 2 weeks, the price of this lens has already dropped $100, probably getting ready for the holiday season. So it's gone from $499, which is where I bought it at, down to $399. So now you're only looking at $400. And then that leads into the other piece of good news, and that piece of good news is that yes, this is a very, very good lens. This is a lens that I am proud to use on client jobs. This is a lens that I professionally use shooting photos, shooting video. It's wonderful, and I'm a huge fan of the 35mm focal length. Like, I just love that. I mean, I think it's good for portraits, it's good for product, it's good for lifestyle. It's just so versatile. So the focal length is so versatile. And then on top of that, they add in the macro capability. So now all of a sudden you have this wider focal length. You know, it's not a 24, but it's not a 50. You have this nice focal range. But then at the same point, you have macro, which is exceptional. I will say specifically it's exceptional if you're doing anything that needs detail shots. So if you're doing product photos, maybe you're doing nature photography, photography and video. I use this for both. I do both photo and video with this heavily, and I love it. And the thing that's different from the previous kind of cheaper lenses that Canon used to release with like the EF line, I've got a few of those here. I used to have the 50, the nifty 50. This thing was just straight up plastic. While I did get some good results out of this thing, the autofocus was pretty garbage. And you didn't look like a professional running around with this tiny, tiny little lens on your camera. And so that was kind of the thing. You always wondered, like, should I be using this or not? It was $250 back in the day. And while you could get some really good photos, and you had to practice pretty hard to really make the video work, especially in manual, it just wasn't really, it didn't really live up to what it should be. But again, it was $250. And then, I mean, that probably begs the question, if you're coming from these older EF, these cheaper lenses, you're questioning, like, is this valuable? Is this useful? Is it worth, am I gonna just lose $400? Or should I just go ahead and go for the, the higher end, the L series glass? This is the 15 to 35 here. But the build quality is on par. It's the same quality. You can feel it. It's the same quality as these L series glass, albeit of course it's not as heavy as the 15 and 35, but you can feel it. The build quality, again, is on the same level. Whereas back with the EF line, these were just terrible, terrible build quality. So build quality is exceptional. You can really tell that Canon is doing things differently than they used to with their cheaper lenses. With the build quality of this lens is really nice, and it fits really well on any R series camera, R5, R6, the R, R7, maybe the R3. If you take the battery grip off, the battery grip that I use, then you really have a low profile, a very minimal setup that you can carry pretty much anywhere. And like I said, at a 35mm, you're able to get wider shots. Again, albeit it's not as wide as a 24, but it's still wide. But then you have that versatility of the macro ability. And like, that's really cool on a 35mm lens, is that this can be a one and done, not for everything, but it can be kind of a one and done lens for a lot of types of photography that you may be doing, or a lot of types of video. I love having this with the 35 as a B cam to my Canon C70 when I'm doing product videos. So I'll set up my C70 for some wider shots. I'll shoot raw on the C70. And then on the R5, I'll pop this on here and I will actually go handheld, because yes, this lens is stabilized. So I will go handheld with this lens and I will get really nice and tight on specific things of a product or an environment that I want to call out and bring into the additional footage that I'm getting with the C70. So it's incredible for those reasons for me. Like I'm not gonna put this on the C70. It would look hilarious on a C70. It would just look hilarious on a cinema body. So I would never do that, but on the R5, absolutely. And if you got any other R series camera, it's going to be an exceptional lens. And like I said, there is one piece of bad news. And it's not huge, honestly, it's not unusable, but that bad news is that the autofocus, especially where you're having trouble with contrast, it's in low lights, it's not really able to distinguish what is your subject and what's the background. This thing will hunt majorly for focus. In previous experience, when this was used for weddings or any other shoot where you don't have control over the lighting, you don't have lighting set up yourself, the autofocus is pretty unreliable, and that's the bad news. But if you're a videographer, you should get familiar with using manual focus, and the manual focus is really nice. The focus wheel is much more grippy, much nicer than you got with this tiny crappy ring on the very edge of the Nifty 50 with the EF. So you're gonna have a lot better control with the ring on this one in those low light situations, in those situations where you're not gonna have good contrast for it to be able to pick up the autofocus. And even in some good lighting conditions, it's going to struggle to find focus, like I said, based on whatever kind of contrast you have in your image. It's trying to figure out where that focus needs to be. I just wouldn't rely on the autofocus heavily on facial tracking. Like if you're doing an interview, yeah, I've never had any issues with the facial tracking with good lighting on somebody's face. But if you're doing spots, autofocus, or any other kind of autofocus, there's gonna be a chance that it's going to hunt and that could ruin your footage. So from a video standpoint, just know that, and know that you're probably gonna have to switch to manual. And if you don't know how to do manual focus, well, now is the time to start learning and upping your skills where that is concerned. But from a photography standpoint, I don't have any beef with the autofocus. I've never had any issues with the autofocus. The autofocus has always been snappy, it's been on point, it's always gotten me exactly what I need to get. Never had any issues from a photo standpoint. So if you're purely just a photographer, no issues. But if you're somebody who does shoot video content, you might experience, it's likely to experience some issues when the autofocus is concerned. But again, it's now a $400 lens. It's an exceptional lens. It's sharp throughout. It has so much versatility from 35 to going up close and getting those macro shots that my beef with the autofocus really just isn't that big of a deal at the end of the day, because the quality of the images that I'm getting out of this are superb. It's a great budget lens, and it doesn't feel like a budget lens. It doesn't look like this was truly a budget lens. It just doesn't look and feel like that. So yes, at the end of the day, is it any good? Absolutely, it's good. It's even better now because it's $100 cheaper. I would still recommend it at $500, but now that it's $400, I still recommend it to you. All right, if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would hit the like button, and I would really appreciate it if you're enjoying this content, if you've seen any of my other content and want to see more, to hit that subscribe button, because it really does help me to keep this channel going. And yeah, we'll talk about gear on another video. I've got some plans for some new gear coming up, and I will review some of those pieces on the next videos. So I will see you guys later.